If you could grab a seat and up close if you could, that'd be helpful because we're going to be asking again, this is really about listening today. We will have a microphone that we'll pass around, but we don't have the testimony microphone to come up to, right? So we're going to pass the microphone around. But thank you for joining us today. My name's Dixon Holmes. I'm the Director of Economic Development here at Provo City, and we very much appreciate using the space today, the Taylors making their space here at the Startup Building available. Many of you I know are very familiar with this and have been to this space before, so thanks for joining us. We have some good pizza back there from Nico Italia, so that's some good pizza. But thanks for joining us. We're going to turn the time over to Mayor Kafusi here in just a moment for a really brief introduction, then turn it back to myself. But really, we will have failed today if we do all the talking. And really, we're here to hear from you. And so we, maybe not any ground rules per se, but you know how they say that, when you're throwing out ideas, don't want to throw any wet blankets or harsh on anyone's ideas. So we want to really hear from you, even if you think they're just a little bit crazy. We will be taking notes. We will be filming this. And again, just want to hear from you. So Mayor Kafusi, if you could join for a second, and we'll...
I don't know which side to go on with the poll, because I love you and I love you. I first just want to say thank you to everyone for coming out today. We're super excited about this. The whole point of this today is for us to get feedback from you and you be like brutally honest with us. I want you to tell us what we can do better to serve you, because you play such a critical role in our community. And so I'm here to listen. My economic development team is here to listen and learn. And so I hope you'll be brutally honest and tell us how we can help you and better serve you as you know, important members of this community. And the PowerPoint is just going to keep rolling through, and what it does is just kind of keeps us on point. Questions will pop up that'll remind you kind of what we're looking for to help us get to some solutions. Other than that, we really appreciate you taking your time and eat up on pizza. We have a lot of pizza over there, so please keep eating.
Thanks, Mayor. So again, we will have a microphone that we're going to send around. Just a couple other of who's here. So we have our Chief Administrative Officer, Wayne Parker. He's what Mayor Kafusi doesn't do, he does. We also have Isaac Paxman, our Deputy Mayor. We also have Matt Taylor, who is our parking czar, parking services manager. We have Cameron Christensen and Chad Thomas, also with the Economic Development staff, and Cliff Strachan, our Council Administrative Director, or Council Executive Director. And so again, we have some people here who are in the know and be able to influence. But again, the main purpose today is to listen. But let me just really quickly just address something that is maybe on your mind, especially if you are in this area frequently. I want to take you back to 2011. So right now in 2011, you'd be covered with sawdust because this used to be a cabinet shop. And upstairs, there were a few random offices. And across the way used to be Anderson Lumber. And then just south of here was Atlas Steel. And there used to be on 2nd West and 5th South, there was a big vacant gravel parking lot that actually people didn't park on because there was a canal that went through it. But this place, if you even knew that it was here, was probably not a place that you came to very often. And I'm going to go back and forth because otherwise I'm going to divide people or you'll divide me. But the point is that it wasn't a very popular place to be because there was good things going on, but nothing like what's going on today. And so part of what's happened is we've become a victim of our own success, and parking is a premium and it's an issue, and we get that. it's not necessarily a great problem to have, but it's sort of a good problem. It's indicative that this is a popular place to be. And so with that, there are things that we're working on, but most of you or some of you are entrepreneurs, and I'd put it back to you. You're a smart person. What's the market solution to this? And again, so we're just going to acknowledge that up front. If you want to talk about parking for the next hour and a half, I think we've wasted the opportunity. But what we'd really like to do is hear from you. And so you've seen some of the questions that are up there. And so we recognize that we have a role, and we're here to listen to what you think our role can be or should be. And so here's the microphone. So who's going to be the first person to tell us their thoughts? Back here. Okay, very good. So you can kind of address up front, but there's really no one up front. I'm going to be, if it gets quiet, I'll start asking some more questions, but it really is to listen.
I think for the
And tell us who you are.
hi, my name's Amy Fine, and I'm with Sumption Business Law. And I was listening about the parking issue, and today when I was crossing from the front runner parking lot over here, I crossed the bridge, and there's a narrow sidewalk, and it's kind of scary to me. I think one possible solution would be to allow people to park at the front runner parking lot and build a tunnel underground that connects over to the startup building.
Actually, we're going to be better. We're going to have a bridge.
Or what'd you say?
There's going to be a bridge eventually.
Okay, I think a tunnel would be nice because weather conditions sometimes make it easier for people to go underground where there's over protection, and I think a bridge is fine as well. But anyways, I've seen the underground tunnels and I like them.
Okay. Good. So what is Provo City's role in helping startups, tech businesses, early stage businesses? And we get there's a variety of that, right? I mean, so up in Riverwoods, you have some of the big boys, Qualtrics and others. John?
I know it was a little bit of a rabble-rouser on parking, so I'm going to explain it. First of all, I want to say I love the Kafusis. I know them as friends, and Michelle and Steve. Steve's here too. Where are you at, Steve? So they have great kids and great people. Dixon, you're awesome economic development leader, and Wayne, you're like the best COO of a city anywhere. So, but I want to say one thing about, I've investigated why I got so frustrated with parking and around here, because it's indicative of just overall support. And I think what the problem is in Provo a little bit, this is my interpretation from doing a lot of investigation, hearing from over 500 or 600 people that signed my petition about parking, is that the city is a little siloed in its departments. So when engineering, or there's, let's go be more aggressive on parking, there's not a correlated overall saying, okay, how is this going to impact everything from this siloed decision? I think that's my interpretation as a business person and a manager to look at the situation. And so it all has a cascading effect because it needs to be handled and think about what's going to be the overall impact. Because yes, let's go be more aggressive on parking. People are messing up parking in front of driveways. There's all those problems. You got to police parking. We know that. But we've got to also think about overall, what's this going to do for everything? Because it doesn't help economic development for Pro to be known as the parking nightmare city, which it apparently is, because I got a lot of feedback after I did my change, and I see people shaking their heads in the audience. That's not a good reputation for business. Matter of fact, a lot of Lehigh people wrote me and said, just come to Lehigh. We build parking structure. We got lots of parking around our business places. So that's what you are all fantastic people. I'm sorry I rabble-roused on parking, except for the fact that it's just overall, if we're going to go to the next level in Provo, it's got to not be a siloed approach on decision making. We've got to say, overall, what is this decision going to impact everything and make the best overall decision? And I think we shouldn't let the individual departments be a tail that wags the overall dog. The overall dog should still determine when the tail gets wagged and how. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and so relative to that, so within the next...
that affects not just parking, but
right. No, so for the next...
tunnels versus bridges.
Yep.
Incentives to landlords to make lower cost rent available to startups. All that starts coming into play, right?
Yeah. And so within the next 30 days before the end of April, Matt, raise your hand again. Matt Taylor. So we're going to have a parking summit, okay? Because again, there's smart people in the room. The city has some smart people too, and we want to hear about that. And so stay tuned to social media, and we'll have a date, time, and location to hear more about parking, because again, we know that's not just a small issue. So, right here, you're going to tell us more what Provo can do to help your business or other businesses be successful in the tech sector. Go ahead. Tell us your name again.
Yeah, so my name's Tanner Thompson. I work as a data scientist. I actually work for remotely for a business in Connecticut. So my business isn't here in Provo, but I do live here. I actually live on this block in the Startup Crossing apartments that are right next to you.
Those people. Okay,
Yeah.
cool.
I love it. Say what? Where do you park? I don't drive, actually.
Awesome. Applause, please, for him.
I mean, my wife does park right there
Okay.
in the apartment parking.
Go ahead.
But before, as an example, before I started working remotely, I worked up in South Jordan for Lucid Software, and I took the train every day because their office was right next to the train station. I live here right next to the train station. I'm a big fan of public transit, and so first I want to applaud the fact that the bridge here is even being talked about. I think it's a great idea, but the wheels have been turning for a while. I first found out about it in 2015, and I was a big advocate for it, and I heard nothing for a year. I think I found it in 2016, and then I heard nothing for a year, and then last year, heard a little bit more. Then they had a little town hall meeting, and it seems like it's moving slowly, but I don't know if the answer is to eliminate the silos in government, but I do want to... Yeah, it needs to be something, because it's moving slow. On the technical side, I've always wondered why it wasn't considered to build a staircase from the train platform up to the road bridge and to widen the sidewalk there, because that would accomplish almost the same thing. I mean, the sidewalk is very narrow, so anyway, that aside, another idea that I had as far as parking and public transit is to establish kind of a free fare zone like they have in Salt Lake, where in Salt Lake downtown, between the train station and the courthouse and library, I think you can ride tracks for free. If you go farther, obviously you have to pay the fare. But I think that one of the barriers that a lot of people have to riding the bus is they don't know how to pay the fare. They don't know, like, am I going to have to bring cash? Am I going to, need to buy a fare pay card or whatever? I mean, there are other boundaries as well, I think, that could be solved maybe with better marketing. And don't get me wrong, I like UTA, and I think that they've done a decent job with marketing. But I mean, ultimately, it boils down to a societal problem and a lot of biases that people have with riding public transit. But as far on the practical side, if people knew that they could park at the front runner station and take the bus, like 6-8 blocks, up to downtown Provo for free, and the bus, it currently runs every 15 minutes, but let's say it ran every 5 minutes, then, and with BRT it will. So I think that would, if people were aware of that and realized that it was an attractive option, that it was free, so they wouldn't have to park downtown, that might be a good way to get a lot of cars out of downtown.
So we're going to go back to our question. So we're local government. I'm not going to say we're here to help, because you've heard that one before. But what do you expect of your local government in the sector of tech, startup, early stage? What can we do or stop doing? We've already heard the parking thing of stop doing some stuff there. But what could we do? I mean, do you want us to give out free money? Because it's your money, right? It's tax dollars. Right here. Good friends from Rev Road.
Yeah, so I'm Darren Hill. I work with Red Road, and I love the approach to life where it's better to focus on the things that are working and do a lot more of those. I think the best leaders focus on the greatest opportunities and less on the problems. So I'm going to switch us away from parking, if that's okay, because I think there are lots of solutions to that and good, smart people who can do that. And frankly, it's a high-class problem. Because if we were a dying town, we wouldn't have that problem. Yep. So I just read a new report that came out last month that said that Provo is one of only 5 sectors where we're creating, 5 cities where we're creating more companies than we're destroying in the United States, one of 5 cities. So my focus would be on that, is I think we really ought to highlight our standing in that area and encourage entrepreneurs to keep doing that, and to really brand the city as the place to start a business, as we've talked about, but also the place to stay and grow your business. And Tom and his group are about to put on a wonderful event this coming weekend. Super excited about that and what that will do. We just had a competition a few weeks ago at Rev Road where we had 60 companies compete. That was phenomenal. I think the city's support for those kinds of events is really crucial for making sure that entrepreneurs feel welcome here, not just in the formation stage, but afterwards. I still remember when John Curtis first came to visit us when we started Imagine Learning. And he brought the entire city entourage. And when they came to visit us, it really made a difference to us. It was encouraging, it provided some enthusiasm, and it wasn't just once. He came over and over again. And so I've seen Michelle really reach out to make that possible. She's been over to Rev Road. I see her at these events. I see great activity there. Same thing with Dixon and Cody, the whole rest of the team. So to the degree that we can go through the branding exercise, which doesn't use a lot of tax dollars, but could use some, right? I mean, you just gave the mall a brand new sign and extra high footage.
For the record, we didn't give that to
No,
them.
no, no,
For
you know what I mean.
We approved it.
You
Okay,
approved,
just wanna set the
you
record,
approved an
establish
extra high
expectations.
sign.
That's right. No, that's good because the
And-
city made some accommodations for a
Yeah.
code that didn't allow it.
Yes.
So that if there's other things like that, that's what we need to hear.
That was a great example of working with businesses. And frankly, I think they ought to give you a little something back in terms of giving the city the ability to help work on our brand as the place for entrepreneurs to start and stay with their business.
Darren, thank you. Okay, if I need to come back to you, I will. I want to come back, so keep raising your hands when people are done. Introduce yourself.
Steve Sumption with Sumption Business Law as well. So I really like the comment that was just made and the confidence to change the topic because Provo really does have a potential for branding that is second to none. How hard is it to get Forbes and CNBC, Business Week, and all of these metrics that are being used to evaluate why Provo is named number one, not just as a state, number one of all 50 states, but to have on your website, very simple opportunity for the city of Provo to have on our Provo website, here are all the articles identifying why Provo is number one or number two, and make that readily accessible. Have the opportunity to go with Mayor Curtis to China and the kind of make presentations in Hangzhou where the G20 summit was just 2 years ago, a week after the G20 summit, and the number of people that were just in awe. Well, why haven't we heard more about Utah and Provo? So let's keep that going. A simple step is to get that information out on all those articles.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Thanks. I'm Rod McKenzie. I'm a business coach and I'm marketing officer. There's a lot of money being put into branding Silicon Slopes. And it starts at the point of the mountain, and then you have all the industry, and then it basically ends. Now, why not piggyback on Silicon Slopes? Why does Provo have to be outside of that? You could have Silicon Slopes of Provo or something of that nature. Don't take and try to compete with the brand, adapt into it, because that's where the tech HQ is for Utah, basically. And why not bring Provo into that? And, because you got Silicon Slopes branding, there's a lot of money being spent on that. And then you could adapt Provo into it, and it all works together instead of fighting against the neighbors.
Hi, my name is Tom Taylor. I'm your building host today, so thank you. And my comments are really going to address sort of the very local area. We've been knocking around the idea of a startup district for some time, and I would love to see the city actually endorse a startup district. And I would recommend a fairly tight boundary around that, like 6 blocks from 6th South up to 3rd, from University over to 2nd, just a very small area that is an area that's filled with, lesser used places, old warehouses, things like that, that the core of that could be sort of a south of Market from San Francisco, kind of an early Brooklyn. what drove those spaces was low cost. Creative people came in there and they turned it around, and gentrification came from the bottom up. And the reason I mention that gentrification is because one of our frustrations has been the notion of engineering coming in with a uniform road plan. And if anyone wants to see what that looks like, you can go to the far side of the Hayden Fur building, where there's a sidewalk that goes straight into the side of our building. Because that is the plan, is that you'll have a sidewalk with that setback, and it goes straight into a brick wall that's been there since 1911. The engineering department said, well, why don't you move the building? I hope that doesn't happen. I hope it's there for another 100 years. And within that district, I think looking at how do we get more creative things, how do we get more entrepreneurial things. We've got a couple of art studios over here. We've got one building filled with art studios. Boxcar is right next to it. There's a new barber shop and a little coffee shop. It has, it's got a certain type of vibe, and I'd love to see the city hang back on gentrification and let it sort of grow naturally and make the things that can happen here just much more flexible. Live work. Provo doesn't really have a strong live work policy. We talked for about an hour with some people at the community development area, and at the end of it, their summation was, yeah, you can do this development and people could live in it or they could work in it. We said, no. We want to live and work in it like other cool cities. There is a huge, shifting topics slightly, we just finished a building called the Bright Building, which is focused on digital media. And there's a huge digital media presence here in Utah. It is growing very fast. It is one of the most profitable sectors we've ever seen. And with startups, we've all seen really good startups grow up and leave. The film industry is here, and if we give it a little bit of a nudge, we give it some encouragement, we give it some recognition, I think it's here to stay, because it's hundreds of small companies. It's 2 or 3 people doing this, 2 or 3 people doing that. And when there's a production, they all pull together and work. And then they go back to their small little businesses. But it's a very interesting business because that industry won't grow up and move away because it's 100 independent decisions. But there is no there, as Gertrude Stein said about Oakland. Finally, an artist built a statue called There in Oakland, and so there is a there now there. But the notion of having a center, having a focus, having some acknowledgement from the city for that type of thing. Sorry, scattered notes. Bouncing back, we'll never be a Lehigh in terms of sparkly new mid-rise buildings. We'll never be an Orem in terms of retail. But there's a huge demand for small spaces that people want to work in, 5 to 20 people. And we could be a leading low-cost provider for really creative spaces that people are really excited about. And going to the branding, was it you talking about Silicon Slopes? He left. Okay. Well, hey, there went the brand. Tying into that, getting a brand down here that most city districts that sort of become cool, they have an ethos and they've got a name. And I think that we could do that fairly easily here. And focus on those small mid-range businesses. So much of America is based on small businesses. The big ones may grow up and move away, but the bulk of activity is those small businesses. I think that's it.
We can come back to you, Tom. Go ahead.
I want to start by saying the Taylors have done such cool things for Provo. I moved here 2 years ago, and I made most of my friends in this room, and I think it's just the coolest thing. So thank you. I work with a lot of female entrepreneurs. I'm Jessica Freck. I'm a creative freelancer in Provo. I've been here for 2 years. But I work with a lot of freelancers that are female or I own minority businesses. And I'm curious to what Provo is doing to help minority-owned businesses launch here in Provo and stay here in Provo. I don't have an answer to how we can help do that, but I know what we need. And that's good space that's like affordable. We need relationships and partnerships that maybe only the economical development team can introduce us to people, and things like that. So I guess I'm curious if there's a plan to help more businesses like that open in Provo.
So the city doesn't have a ton of cash, so it's mostly connections. We buy a lot of pizza. We help, rather than maybe individual businesses, for those who make space available like the Taylors. So the city's actually put quite a bit of money into this building by way of a couple grants and some loans. And that's one of the ways we do it, by then providing that lower cost, because many of the startups can't take on a market rate lease, which that's the goal, is to get them to that point. But we can maybe chat some more offline, but because we don't have a lot there, Jessica, but this is again part of why we're here today, is to help us say, what is the appropriate role? What should it be? Because again, government can do some really good things, pick up garbage, put out fires, police and all that, but other things not so much. And while we think we have a role, help us define what that would be. And so what I tell people, it's like, listen, if you have an idea for us to do, give us a letter, write out your very best day, what you think it should be, and then, Tom smiles because he's heard this a number of times, is then I'll tell you what we can do or what we can't, and then at least you know what our wheelhouse is. And so if there's things that you have ideas that's like, I think you should try this, give us a try, and if it's not illegal or immoral, we'll at least consider it. John.
So I didn't say who it was. John Richards with Startup Ignition. So I guess the overall thing, I'm all for being optimistic, but we also have to be realistic on some things. So just as you're making decisions, the city, my request would be, is this going to increase friction or decrease friction for startup companies?
Okay.
And think every time before you ink a decision, that's all.
Okay.
So back to positive things. So I think you do need to do some research, find out why Susan Prater from Agilent, but Susan Peterson left and went to Lehigh. Why do all these companies, except for $1 Billion Row, but now we've had one of those. Why did Peak Capital, why is it moving its venture arm, which is what, it was so cool to have Peak Ventures in Provo, and now they just moved to Lehigh. Why? So I think you need to go to about 4 or 5 key players that have moved in the last year or two to Lehigh and ask, why did you do that? What would it have taken to get you to stay? Because this idea, I like the statement over here. Mayor Curtis, great friend, wonderful person. I didn't agree with saying Provo's the place where companies are born, because we can't keep them here. And we focused on that. And I like our new mayor saying, no, we want to keep them here. So you've got to find out why they're leaving before you can find out how to keep them here.
Sure.
And have you done that research? Have you had one-on-one interviews with those CEO founders and find out why they moved and what they're doing, and why there's this exodus from Provo when they get to a certain stage? And because this is a tech summit, and
Yep.
Peak Ventures moving to Lehigh from Provo is not good for Provo startups, in my opinion, because now they're going to be inundated from things from farther away, Salt Lake County, and be a nexus for that, and we're going to get less capital funding Provo startups. And so that kind of thing. Second last thing I'm thinking about is Google Fiber, which I have a little knowledge on. I've noticed the price is going up for small business, to $250 from $100 for a gigabit connection. And I'm just still wondering, the promise of Google Fiber was that this downtown area would have free Wi-Fi at really fast speeds for everybody. I haven't seen that happen, or has that happened yet? I don't know. Has it? Because that was one of the original contractual, or at least oral agreements. And then why the price keeps going up on Google Fiber. My home one's gone from 100 to 170. I know they have costs, and maybe the business isn't turning out as well for them, but it's impacting things. It was so exciting to think of a gigabit connection for a small business for $100 a month, but now it's $250, and where's it headed to? So if we can hold them to keep this great connectivity, and then we need to market the heck out of all those cool things like everybody was saying. Because if you said, come to Provo, do business here, we can get you gigabit connections. Maybe the city can work out a deal with Google Fiber that's a win-win and say, give every business that relocates to Provo free gigabit for a year when they come here. and have Google Fiber cover some of that expense of riding that, because they'll get a long-term,
Yeah.
maybe 10-year customer, things like that.
Okay, thank you, John. Anybody else on that notion of businesses going to Lehigh? That's one that we've scratched our head about, and John, thank you. We've actually talked about going up and talking to some of those handful of businesses that have left, to just scratch the surface to see if we can figure that out. But thank you, that's good. Right here, and then we'll go to the back.
Yeah, so I've actually, some of the things I've heard that they're moving to Lehigh is because of the talent pool in Salt Lake. They can pull from that, whereas like it's difficult to ask someone from Salt Lake to come to Provo, right? No one does that. Not a lot of people do that. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know if we need like more free educational services in Provo and events or something like that, or we just need to build up that ecosystem that you were talking about, because once you have that, then like you know where your talent pool is.
So you said, let me just follow up on a statement. You said no one does that. Is that because like we have something, like it's communicable, or why won't, is it a distance thing, or is it the blue versus red? Is it the more supposedly open or accepting and more closed-minded? I don't know. I'm just trying to understand that. Why?
So no, I think it's all that. And again, I've only been here for 2 years. So the last position I was in, someone said that people won't drive from Salt Lake to Provo because it's in their blood. I don't know what that means, but apparently and I've seen this with my friends, whereas like I'll drive up to Salt Lake, but Salt Lake won't drive down to Provo. And if it is a cultural thing, if it is the ecosystem, then that means something's broken, right? So we have to find some way of fixing that.
Okay. Here, and then we'll come back here.
Yeah, I have a lot of clients that work up in Lehigh that have relocated from Orem and Provo. A lot has to do with just with geography. You know, it's closer to Salt Lake, it's closer to the airport, it's closer to things that they perceive that are valuable to their business. And so we're kind of battling a geography, so to speak, kind of thing, and getting a talent pool that someone who works in Murray or lives in Murray or someplace like that, you know, and then the whole development on the west side, you know, you've seen all of that. A lot of people who live on the west side in Salt Lake, there's really no reason for them to go to I-15 anymore. They've got schools, they've got businesses, they've got shopping there. So all of that is, I think they've just done a good job of taking advantage of geography plus what the local talent pool is there. To kind of address your question with minority-owned businesses and encouragement, I actually sit on the Provo Community Block Grant Program, and the city runs grant proposals through that to help stimulate that every now and then. We just funded a program over at for a community kitchen for people that want to do startup chip cookies started in that location and things like that. So there are ways to do that. What I've seen during the Curtis administration is you get a lot of Parks and Rec and the city wanting to do curb and gutter and things run through that community block grant program. So you get our city wanting to push programs through there that offsets their operations budget, where it really could be utilized a little bit better. We used to have a face-to-face with the city council at the beginning of every session of that when we meet once a year, where the city council and the mayor would sit down and say, these are our priorities, these are the things we'd like to see, you know, but we had one city council member attend all of those sessions, and I've been in that, and that's the first time in 7 years I've seen a city council member attend that community block grant program. So I think there's programs within the city that can help some of these things. We're just not utilizing them as effectively and as efficiently as we can.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm going to just present a radical approach, but I think it's good to think outside the box sometimes. And I think one of the biggest things that can help Provo is to bridge the divide for transportation and help people get around. That will get people here. It will get people from Salt Lake to Provo. To me, it means you make it easy to get here. Don't make it take an hour to get from Salt Lake to Provo. Give us a way to where we can get from A to B quickly. And when I was working in Salt Lake, I took the train every day. And it was heaven. I could work on the train when people didn't want to talk to me. I could work on the train, and I loved it. And I think so. This is just sort of and this is radical. But what if I know in Texas they've got a city where they have these drones that fly people to and from work. What if we got something like that in Provo? We were able to get Google Fiber here. Why can't we do something like that here? We can just fly over Thanksgiving Point, Lehigh, and the point of the mountain and just get to where we need to be. So anyways, just thinking of things like that. I know that's radical, but they are doing it in some places.
Okay, thank you. Okay, go back here from the front, or the back and then up front.
Chris Padilla. I've been downtown Provo since like 2010. So not as long as a lot of people, but and then I've had a couple businesses here. I work with the Taylors with Startup Weekend and 1 Million Cups. I think that Tom's idea of creating a place for entrepreneurs, a district, is cool. We went to Kansas City and we saw some neighborhoods that were houses where, Startup Village.
You mentioned that, you go with it.
Yeah. So Startup Village, where it was an area that was residential that the city made open to let entrepreneurs put offices there. And it was fun to see the creativity. It was fun to feel kind of this unique environment that allowed entrepreneurs to build spaces in spaces where typically they wouldn't be able to be built. It was fun. And I think Kansas City's done a really good job of embracing entrepreneurs. From many levels, not as Dixon's famous for saying, what can the city do, right? But from foundations, from people giving back, from the community. And I think, some of the conversations I've had with Dixon has been more about what the community is feeling, as friends, as brands, as the people who are helping make Provo what Provo is are moving away. You feel it. You feel it when your Omadi, who is my neighbor at the office building I'm at right now, is leaving, and I say, well, where are you guys going? Oh, we're going to Lehigh, right? And I just, because I'm curious about this, I talked to a lot of their employees. And not everyone in their company was going to Lehigh. Some of them were, and some of them were being laid off. So I don't think I think there's a magnetic pull that's happening because people want to be in a certain place. And I think Provo's done a great job of, historically, with John being involved with Google Fiber and making internet something. Internet is really important to businesses. It's really important to people. It's how we communicate, and if there's a break in how we communicate, we don't want to be there. And so I think internet is a great focus potentially, but I also think the places are really key. And John talks about landlords, and I think landlords are critical to helping entrepreneurs. I was in Provo Town Square. And the way I got into Provo Town Square initially was I rented like 500 square feet for like $450 a month. Well, as my business grew, I took on another 500. I took on another 500. I took on another 500. And Richard, who lived in Provo at the time, Richard Gregory, was really open to that. But as there's been more demand, the landlords sometimes become a little bit less willing to work because they feel like they can get a higher rate and they're not as flexible, and they feel like there's higher demand. They become a little bit more picky, which means those people who could grow from a 500 to a 2,500 a month don't have a place to go that isn't dumpy or kind of like BYU basement apartment style place. A place where you can be creative, where you're excited to invite someone. And I'll say this last piece. I think that, I'm all about the positive vibe. And I think that we should focus and continue to see more from Provo on what it is that makes Provo so awesome, because it is. We need that. Entrepreneurs need that. The businesses need that. But I will say I have invited, I had a startup idea. I invited Vivint Solar down for lunch, and it was 2 of their C-levels and a VP, and they all got towed. Somewhat killed the business lunch vibe that we had going, because they had to go pay $300 to get their car back. And then with 1 Million Cups and John's experience, where we have entrepreneurs come and present their businesses to a community, which a lot of people here come. And you know, John being an investor and a contributor to our event, you know, questioning if he should come because he's getting tickets and other people are getting parking tickets. It does trickle down. And I'm not saying that that's the only problem, but it is, if that's the only interaction that most people have with the city, then that's going to be the perception that's created of the city. And so I think that we need to just maybe hear, the parking can be what it is, but if they're hearing other things that are going on, I think that that'll become less of a problem. I think that people feel the loss of cool people leaving, and so let's highlight the cool people that are staying, and let's get more cool people to come. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, don't leave, Chris. Okay, go ahead right here. And we have a couple over here that've been.
I'm actually from Kansas City, so it's cool to hear his story. It used to be that if you're in Kansas City, you had to keep a baseball bat in your car just in case. But in the last 15 years, it's a happening place. It's a cool place. You can walk around, feel safe, have the culture of the city, but it feels not only that it's paying tribute to the past, but it's actively engaging in the future. My name is Adam Arnett. I work as a consultant. I've worked in Provo for a few different companies. Right now I work with private equity and venture capital firms in California, Oregon, Washington, and I do small business consulting here in the Utah area. Right now it's kind of a benchmark for your business's progress to be able to make the jump from Provo-Orem to Lehigh. It's just what it is. We've had so many companies leave here to greater success in Lehigh that it's a reputation. One of the things that we lack that Lehigh's done really done well with is they've managed business density, which means the businesses can feed off each other's reputations. If we think about where all the big businesses are in Utah, we kind of stratify. We have little pockets here and there, but we don't have that collective power of everyone's brands feeding each other else's. And that's not just nationally, that's just from I-15. I can see the success of Utah, and I want to be part of that. Because of the work that I do, so this is a SaaStr shirt. It's the largest SaaS tech conference in the world. When I go there and I talk to companies, they don't ask where Provo is. They don't know what Sundance is. But I have said, oh, I'm from Utah. And they said, is that near Lehigh? And like, you know how it feels like to get stabbed in the back a little bit? It's kind of how I felt. I've lived here in Provo for 10 years, and I like Provo. I'm still here. But Lehigh has the reputation where the businesses are happening. Independent of whatever the articles are saying, people know Lehigh is where business is happening. Unfortunately, Provo's kind of lost the edge there. One of the questions was, how can we retain talent? Some of that comes down to housing compatibility. So we talk about the early phase of a startup, which is pulling yourself up from the bootstraps, and then we'll get established businesses where you can afford those 450 to $500,000, $1 million homes. But what we really need to focus on if we want to grow businesses here, not just start them up and feed them up north, is look at housing compatibility specifically for entry-level and mid-tier employees that are making between $400,000 and $75,000. What they're looking for isn't necessarily the sprawling estate, though some people want that, but they do want some levels of density, and they don't want to do it on major corridors. They want green space, and they want to feel like they're in a neighborhood, not just a housing project. And that's something I've seen both Provo and Orem struggle with, and your housing compatibility has a lot to do with your future economic growth and development. One of the issues that we have here is incompatible messaging from the city. When they say they want to retain employees, they don't go through the activities that retain those employees. Again, specifically housing issues, education funding, and parking hassles. So it may be okay to have your kids here in Provo School District for their elementary school years, but once they really get into I'm studying, getting ready for college, finding out what my interests and hobbies are, if I can, I'm moving north. And that's unfortunate. I've got family in the area. I love my nieces and nephews, but that's the reputation that Provo School District has as well. And I feel horrible, Mayor Kafusi, but that is where a reputation is. I was talking to a gentleman that works down in Payson, and it has that same issue. One of the issues that they also have with incompatible messaging is the struggle to differentiate between young professionals, married or single, and college students, and their associated wants and needs of a community. And I think that comes to a generational divide. Provo hasn't really stated, this is what we are for the next 50 years. And part of that's because we've bifurcated our concepts of old city, new city. And that's exacerbated by the fact that we have our neighborhoods plans that really divide the city into miniature cities within a city. And so it's easy for someone who wants to grow a business here to hear things like, we don't want growth. We don't want our view obstructed. We want people out of our city. And that really doesn't make anyone feel like they can come here and bring employees who are going to feel welcome and want to be here. I've brought a number of businesses to Utah from North Carolina, from Missouri, and especially from California. None of them want to come to Provo for a couple of reasons. One, they know that the employees they hire are going to have a better chance finding housing in the Lehigh, Saratoga Springs, Eagle Mountain area, and their higher level employees can find the housing they want in Alpine and Draper and South Jordan. So we don't have appropriate diversity of housing allocations. They also want proximity to the airport. We're pushing it here in Provo. When people talk about, I can drive to Salt Lake, but Salt Lake doesn't want to drive to me, that's because driving to Salt Lake feels like you're moving toward success, toward future, toward innovation. And we are, honestly, the southern end of that. People talk about Google Fiber. Honestly, as I've talked about it on the national stage, people think it's cool, but no one's moving their business because of Google Fiber. There's a blanket expectation that I'm going to have high-speed internet. I'm going to have that, or I'm not going to be there. Google Fiber doesn't necessarily set that benchmark anymore. And one other item is feeling like there's easy access to administration. So there's a lot of bloat and a lot of redirection within the administration. Some of that is just go to City Hall and feel like you can get directed to someone's office. Too often there's a feeling of, oh, you can email someone else. And unfortunately, when you feel like you're forced to email as opposed to talk to someone, you lose that friendly edge. We're not going to be New York. We're not going to be Chicago. So when you come to a city like Provo, you do want some FaceTime with people. And unfortunately, there's some kind of roadblock in that happening. Thanks.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thought I'd introduce myself. I'm Gary Baker, and we just moved our company to Provo in December. Okay. So the company was founded in Sun Valley, Idaho. The name of the company is Sawtooth Software, taken from the Sawtooth Mountain Range in Idaho. And that was in 1983. And we are a technology company, right? IBM PCs and Apple IIs and that kind of thing is in our history. Sun Valley became too expensive such that they couldn't pay employees to a living wage with houses. They moved to a place called Sequim, Washington, which is on the Olympic Peninsula. And that's where I joined the company. I grew up in Orem. I went to BYU, got a degree in computer science, got my MBA, and first job out of college was with Sawtooth Software. The president of the company at the time was also a BYU grad, BYU MBA. He's since retired. Lived up there with my family for 14 years, and the company came to a point where we were about 2.5 hours from SeaTac Airport. The company had grown. I was the 5th employee. It had grown to about 15, and we were doing more training, traveling more. Also our kids were getting older, and there were kind of some personal reasons for wanting. A lot of us were from this area, University of Utah, and the Utah Valley, and so we moved the company here. We bought a place in Orem on 800 North, right by the mouth of the canyon at the Canyon View Business Park, about a 4,000 square foot building there, and we outgrew that building. So the size of the company now is about 30 people. We've hired 5 BYU students this year, 4 and one from BYU Hawaii who will be joining us in a month or two. And we bought the building on North Canyon Road. It's called the HF Pavilion, you know, where Days Market is, and across the street there's a medical, and then we bought the building to the north of that. We take up about 6,000 square feet in a 24,000 square foot building. We have wonderful tenants. Aquaveo is in that building. Compound Claims, these guys right here, they're in that building. They just started leasing from us. Great tenants. What attracted us to that building, we liked the neighborhood. This feel of being in a neighborhood. I mean, to me, that is a lot of what Provo is. You have, and the tenants, you know, we've got people like Jones T-shirts, and he walks to work, you know. I live in East Orem. I ride my bike to work. And I'd like to say that Provo does a great job with cycling and the bike lanes, and to me, that's a very attractive thing. I think about 20 years ago when our building was built. You know, here's this massive, somewhat massive building, 3 stories. It's got a parking structure. I don't know, you know, 1997 when the building was built, I don't know what that Edgemont neighborhood was thinking at the time. It's probably was the largest building in the small neighborhood. There used to be a gas station on the building. You know, Ripples is across the street. But somebody on the city council who had enough foresight to approve that, it's been a blessing to our company. We don't want to move to Lehigh, okay? That's not us. We want to be kind of have this slow and steady growth, and this feeling of not being in Lehigh, right? I don't want the commute. I don't want to live in that type of environment. Okay, so I would say, I mean, that's just kind of a history, and I thought maybe some of you might be interested in somebody that moved in, that came in. So the draws for us, you know, were schooling. A lot of us, again, the kids were getting older, and it was like, hey, we want to be close to our kids as they enter college, and so there was some of that there as well. Google Fiber, it was a nice thing. It wasn't the big draw. We're still on Comcast, right? It's fast enough, but at some point we'll probably switch over. And so those were just some of the things that brought us into Provo, some of the things we really love about it. And I'd encourage the city to continue drawing on your strengths, and you'll continue to go far. You know, it's like with Austin, Texas, they said, you know, keep it weird, right? And Provo, it's like keep being who you are. Don't try and be Lehigh. You look down 20 years. Look 20 years down the road. Things will keep moving this way. People won't always say, oh, Provo is, I don't want to go to Provo, because it's going to keep growing. The population's going to keep growing. I remember 20 years ago when I was in school, I was driving by Lehigh with my father-in-law, and the whole side of the mountain, you know, there's no development there 20 years ago. And my father-in-law turns to me and he says, you know, 20 years ago, a friend of mine offered to go in with me and purchase this large parcel of land on the side of the hill here. And he said, and look at it now, it's still dirt and sagebrush, right? That's gonna keep happening. Growth's gonna keep pushing south, and things will come to Provo. Just keep doing what we're doing. You know, the zoning and things like that. Look, I like this discussion. I've loved the discussion today. I think there's some good things to learn, and appreciate this meeting today.
Go ahead. My name's Dennis Packard, and Tom Taylor mentioned about the growth potential for digital media in this area. He also mentioned the other day about, I'm not certain whether the city has an arts council, and do they have one on digital media? And I think that could be very, very helpful. Let me just give you an example of something. And I'm talking about a council that would have like Allen's camera shop there, because we have a culture of arts that's strong here, but it could be parlayed into a culture that's strong in digital media, because there's extreme competition among the companies, the camera companies, Sony. They've all lost their selling of cameras to consumers, but they're managing to keep their market, their funds coming in about equal to the way it was before, because they're providing more and more fancy kind of equipment, prosumer kinds of things. So there are digital festivals where people use equipment from these companies like Rode mics, and then the winners get equipment from those companies. And Sony could do the same kind of, Sony is one of the leaders getting cutting edge kinds of equipment. The whole arts field right now is just saturated with tech kinds of things, and there's just large competition among them. And I think a council that would focus on digital media could pull together some of the many groups in the Provo area that could foster those things and connect with manufacturers that would foster things within the city.
My name is AJ O'Neill. There's a couple things that when I moved to Provo I really like that feel like they've changed a little bit, and I don't know whether this affects business or not, this first part, so take it for what it's worth, but I kind of had this, in love sensation with Provo. It was very charming. And over the years, like, the movie theater's gone, Albertsons got replaced with Walmart, New Skin is like blocking the whole view of the mountains from Center Street, and you have to be a rocket scientist to figure out how to get to the post office now. And so there's just some of these things in the landscape that have changed. It's just like time changes, like the pie shakes business isn't going to be open forever, and now it's changed names like 6 times, and I don't know if they do pie shakes anymore. But there was kind of this charming, sweet allure to Provo that's breaking down in the same way that these, bricks are crumbling apart on the sides over here. It's kind of cute, but it's also kind of not so cute in some ways. And I don't know if that affects business at all. That's just kind of the emotion of Provo is changing a little bit. One thing that I do think is really affecting business is the way that BYU is not part of the community like it once was in tech. Now there have been some technological advancements that are part of that. I think Slack and Meetup.com and some of these other things have really done a lot of damage to diversity in tech and made things private silos that are closed off. They're not open to easily be accessible anymore. What we used to have was mailing lists, and BYU was really active in those mailing lists. Either groups at BYU sponsored them, or BYU students were participating in them. And I think since emails become not so popular and things like Meetup.com and Slack have become more popular, for some reason BYU isn't hosting these community events through their clubs anymore, and their students aren't really participating in any Provo meetups. There used to be tons of meetups in Provo for different programming technologies. They've all moved to Lehigh. And I don't think that's just because Lehigh is more awesome. I think it might be, and I could totally be wrong, I think it might be that BYU is a little less awesome. And then I'd have to agree with, like, housing around here is terrible. You've got a bunch of dumps that, I mean, I guess they're not really high rent, but they're just terrible places that a lot of employees probably wouldn't want to live because of the whole way that, the thing has changed. But I don't know if that's here or there. The thing I think is really important that maybe could somehow get rekindled is that BYU students, BYU groups, and BYU Tech creating and participating in the hub of what is tech in Provo and bringing at least meetups back to Provo.
Hi, my name is Riker Haddock. I just want to tell, I'm an entrepreneur as of late. I never thought I would start a business, so I started out freelancing, doing product development for a few college-age kids wanting to start up a business. So I kind of got launched into that, and I was doing it by myself for a while until I had the crazy idea to start including other people in the design process and be able to bounce ideas off other people and just be able to more effectively do the job and better serve our clients. And my parents lived in the Edgemont area, about a block away from the HF Pavilion with Sawtooth Software, and so I saw a space available sign. I went and talked to him, and it shocked me on how affordable the rent was that he offered me, just a single office, and so I was thrilled. I paid the first down payment. He offered me a short-term lease as well, for 3 months, just because I didn't know if this was going to just tank into the ground or if it was going to succeed. And just from moving into that small location at an affordable cost that I could afford, I went from being a freelancer to we have a team of five people between the engineers and student engineers, and it's been a really big blessing on my part. And it was something that was uncertain, and when I got an opportunity to move into a decent place with that I could afford, it really helped launch my my business, and we've been able to see a lot of good things happening in this past month that we've been there. So I just wanted to reiterate space, and we're going to get to the point where 5 people in that office is kind of crowded, and we're going to be wanting bigger spaces. So I think to have affordable places, startup, small offices, a medium size space for them to move in afterwards, and really just the small term contract and the affordable for startups can make a difference.
Go back here and then.
Yeah, sorry I didn't introduce myself before. I'm Lee Houghton. I'm with Yes Go. So anytime we get bigger and better signs, I'm all happy about that. But anyways, we're always so worried about Salt Lake eating our lunch, Lehigh eating our lunch, but really for us is 20 years, 30 years from now, Spanish Fork and Payson. So we've lost our edge to Lehigh, but in the next 50 years, Mid-County, South County is going to be eating our lunch. And so I guess it's trying to define our role as Provo in Utah County. And like I said, we always like to compare ourselves to Salt Lake, or now we're comparing ourselves to Lehigh, but there's some major things that are happening growth-wise, things like that's going to be happening in Spanish Fork and Payson. And I think that's probably a more accurate gauge of where our position is in the county versus Salt Lake, or maybe even Lehigh, because that's going to be the central hub of the population, and probably job growth and things like that as well, and probably new business growth is going to be in those areas. So I think that's probably a better indicator for us as far as comparison is concerned versus some of the communities farther north.
Yeah. Hi. I'm Matt Stiles. I'm currently a software engineer at InsideSales.com. Back on the topic of the talent pool. Well, I think it's important, and it's good to talk about how can we bring talent down from kind of up in Salt Lake area and stuff like that. But I think they say an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, right? And I think trying to pull people down is just trying to cure a problem, and that is people leaving. With the 2 major universities, right here in the area, we are basically we are the wellspring of talent, of tech talent here in the area. So the question is, why is our talent leaving, right? And I think Aaron, right? Is that, yeah? I think he touched on it really well. And I think housing, affordable housing, is kind of one of the primary factors for that talent leaving you know, where it started. And so I think it's very important that the city focuses on affordable housing, for entry level and mid level employees and talent. And you know, it's good. We've seen some some apartments going up and stuff like that, which is good. But I think that's going to be one of our main problems there as far as the talent pool is concerned. And a little more going on that. I think that there is a real feeling among those young professionals who do live in Provo. I think there is a feeling among a number of them that there's a bit of some tension, some maybe they don't feel very welcome, some of them here in Provo. And I think some of the recent examples from the city, right, is kind of how the recent handling of multi-tenant housing policies, that whole thing, and even more recently, I believe that there was a meeting over in Provo South. There was a neighborhood meeting in Provo South where it was discussed plans for the property by the old jail, and kind of how that would be developed. And the developer for the project, I mean, I'm not sure if they've locked in that developer yet or what, but there was explicit sentiment from that developer that they intend for that property, the development there, to exclude singles from the area. And so and there were other projects considered for that property, including townhomes, which would be more affordable. Whereas right now, I believe they're separated single-family homes instead. So things like that kind of give the impression that young singles and things like that maybe aren't kind of not welcome in some ways. And so I think the city could do good to reach out to these young professionals and listen to their concerns and take them seriously, and make that a priority to address some of these concerns that they have.
All right, my name's Riley White. I'm going to BYU still. I'll confess it. I'm working for Riker over here. Just partnered with him about a month back. So I'm going to kind of bring up something that's different than probably anybody but him has brought up. What community do we live in, guys? How much % of Provo is students? Huh? Probably, my guess, I'm sure the mayor or some people on her staff would know better than me. My guess is upwards of 50%, probably lowest 30%. That's just a guess, right? Now, obviously, I'm a student, so I'm going to be a little biased there. But how many, this is coming from my perspective, how many companies do you think were at any of the recruiting sessions that I've been to this year? 0. I've been to 2 huge recruiting sessions. 2. There were probably over 100 companies at both of these recruiting sessions. None from Provo. There's a disconnect there. There's a disconnect between us thinking, oh, we got to bring in all these new people. Do we have parking issues? Of course we do. You've got 30,000 students over there. You're never going to have enough parking. What can you do? I don't know. Maybe you could hire some of those students. Then you don't have people coming in from outside the city. You've got people in the city. Yeah, we're not skilled. Do we have the abilities that, say, someone that's got 10 years of experience have? No, but they're going to Lehigh anyway, so what does that matter? My father-in-law, he lives in Springville. He hates his drive up to Lehigh every day. He hates what's called the Lehigh funnel as he's coming south or going north. He doesn't want to go up there. but he's only got one option. But I would, so this is obviously, again, coming from my bias. Me personally, I have really, really struggled to get experience. I talked to people, I talked to Vanderhall before, trying to get in, talk with them, never even received a response. Open up to the community you've got. We can't be someone that we're not. BYU's never gonna move. If anything, it'll grow, right? So use that. That's Provo's strength is its students. It is not bringing in new talent. I mean, not bringing in old talent. It's bringing in new talent. So that's just kind of my pluck for those of us struggling. Since Riker and I have been on, we've had 2 students come to us and say, we're willing to work for you guys for free. Because you guys have such a cool concept, because we're so excited about the work that you guys do, we'll work for you guys for free. We didn't take them up on that offer, but I mean, imagine that. $10 an hour compared to paying someone, my father-in-law gets paid $120,000 in a year. You're paying someone hardly anything, and who knows, maybe they'll want to stay. Maybe if they have a place to go in Provo, maybe they'll want to stay. And who cares if they live in Santaquin if they're still coming here for work or if they enjoy working for you. So there's my pluck. Hope it hits resonance with someone.
Okay, don't give up. Don't give up. Okay, so we're running out of time. We got a question here in the purple, and we'll go right here, and then I'm going to wrap it up. But again, thank you for coming. So go ahead.
My name is Michel. What's that? Oh, hi. My name is Michel Knowles. I'm going to sit down. I'm a full-time musician. I produce music for Warner, the record label. And it's been great being able to live here in Provo and be able to do something like that. I really appreciated what Italia, I can't remember what his name was, what he said about recognizing who we are. As a brand, the most important thing for growth is recognizing who you are, and that helps you develop into who you'll become. I hear a lot of talk about big businesses and communities and growth, but I think what we need to focus on if we're wanting to think about 50 years in the future is what do the people want? And I don't know the answer, but is Provo really a place where we want like the high-rise buildings? Like, do we want all of that corporate here, or do we want, kind of the charming, like this gentleman was talking about here? I think what's most important is seeing what the pulse is of the people, and that'll help us develop into these bigger communities, into what these businesses need to be. The other thing I would think is important to think about is I hear a lot of talk about comparing ourselves to like Lehigh and why are people leaving. As a small business entrepreneur, I have a lot of friends that are also in this field, and I think we just need to focus on what we're good at. I think the gentleman with glasses with the handsome hairdo was talking about focus on what we're good at. Like problems, well, there'll always be problems and problems will get solved, but how do we make sure we don't lose the fire that's already burning? In my community, there's a lot of startups. And a lot of my friends, they're filmmakers, they're artists, designers, musicians, and they're all small. What if it's more of a we understand that people may move on and grow because they need bigger facilities or whatever. That's fine. Our focus is to grow. So instead of trying to get people to come here that are of that bigger echelon of business, let's focus on trying to cultivate this community of startups and trying to cultivate more people coming here, because this is the place where startups happen. And maybe that could be our role in Silicon Slopes, is that, okay, we understand people go move to Lehigh, that's fine, but you guys gotta, maybe throw us some cash so we can get some stuff going for the startups and help grow that. Because I feel, at least my experience living here in Provo for the last 5 or 6 years, is the startup community. That's what I do, and that's the people that I see. So I say we focus on what our strengths are and focus on what the people really want.
I was talking to a friend of mine up in Oregon who's involved with economic development, especially with their chamber. And they were talking about some struggles that Provo also faces, where they have a college there, but they also have bigger cities where people tend to graduate to. And so we're really trying to figure out what their niche was. And
in the state and how they're going to be a viable long-term city that people would want to be in 50 years. And they projected out who's going to want to be here in 50 years as opposed to who has been here for the last 50 years, which is a hard conversation to have. But what they kind of came up with was the model of, let's go back to America's malls. The big indoor 2-story malls where you walk around in a circle. And they sat back and looked at their city and said, who's going to be our anchor businesses? Who's going to be our mid-tier businesses? And how many allocations do we have for small shops to be able to set up? And how many little tiendas are we going to have along the walkways? And at Provo, we might want to have to push that way and be unashamed in saying we're not Lehigh, but we can be our own mall with our anchor stores and with our growing climate. And maybe someone graduates from one of the little walkway shops and goes somewhere else, and maybe they pick up a bigger building within the mall. But if it's a thing to seriously consider in saying, if Provo was a mall, what are going to be our staple businesses? How are we going to connect people between the businesses? And do we feel comfortable just saying this is what we are, independent of the growth or decline of other communities around us?
Thank you so much. Okay, so we're out of time, but not out of thoughts. So we're going to do this again. We don't have a date yet, but we have a camera right here, and if you did not get to say your thing, you can come stand in front of the camera, and we'll record it, and then we'll have it so we can capture that. But again, thank you so much for coming today. Thank you for caring enough to be invested to help us be better. We obviously will make mistakes as a local government, and we've obviously made some mistakes, but by your presence here today, you're telling us that you're here to help us be better so we can be better, to help address your needs so we can all be better together. So again, give yourself applause. Thanks for being here. If you have some comments, please come share them with the camera or staff.
So one of the big strengths in Provo is that we have a lot of community organizations, nonprofits, and other groups who are getting together monthly or weekly. What we don't have is a strong spine connecting those different groups together. The Arts Commission or Economic Development or someone else should get a volunteer who connects those together so that they understand who is in the community and help the community understand the different opportunities for furthering and growth and get a good mechanism for getting the word out and helping understand the ecosystem that we have. Thanks.
My name is Francisco Torres, a self-employed accountant. I provide bookkeeping, payroll, tax preparation services. I just do it by myself now, and I have learned that the technology to work from home is there. So maybe giving a tax benefit to companies that hire people, and these people stay home could help us with not only the parking but the incentive for them to move to Provo or to stay in Provo. Or we'll have some workers working somewhere else. That's it. Thank you.